Yeah. I think that'll work.
So welcome. My name is Pam McNerney, and I am your event host tonight. We are so pleased to welcome to RJ Julia, Tony Renzoni, and Danny Lyons. So Tony is the author of many books, including Connecticut Rock and Roll History, Historic Connecticut Music Venues from the Coliseum to the Shippoon, and Rock and Roll Connecticut Magic Moments and Unforgettable Disc Jockeys. And author of many more as well, including some of my favorites, the Joan Joyce books, which those are amazing. Were those used in the Legacy Theater? Yeah.
There was a hit musical.
Yeah, so there's a musical that went along with that, but the Joan Joyce story is amazing. And then, of course, Connecticut bootlegger Queen Nellie Green is also great. So then there's more, and he's at work on an album as well. So he wrote more than 2,000 weekly columns that were published in the Connecticut Post newspaper and on the paper's website, and he's the recipient of more than 40 awards. So Danny, the longtime host of the beloved Lions Den on WDRC 108, was honored as the 2024 Best Radio Disc Jockey of the Year by Connecticut Broadcasters Association. With an illustrious career spanning over 5 decades, Danny's voice has been a constant presence on the Connecticut radio since 1972. So we will have a book signing after the discussion, and we ask that you please purchase your books first before you get them signed. And now, please welcome once again.
Okay. Hi, rock and rollers. My name is Tony Renzoni. As Pam said, I've written 10 books so far, published books. I'm on my 11th. I can't get the name of it yet. So it's going to be cool. It's not a nonfiction. It's fiction, which is any authors would tell you that that's pretty a lot of creativity. Anyway, this rock and roll radio disc jockeys is a third in what I call a trilogy in my rock books. I started off with Connecticut rock and roll, and we went to Connecticut historic music venues, and now we're up to radio and disc jockeys. So I try to cover it all as best I could. I also want to bring to your attention, if I might, Pam mentioned that my book on Joan Joyce was turned into a hit music, music event, and it was a major hit in the Shoreline and even in Waterbury at the Seven Angels Theater, and we're thinking about possibly moving on to off Broadway.
Wow.
Take some money, but the performances are that great. I didn't have anything to do with the performances of play. You don't want to hear me sing. And so, we're thinking about that. There's another book of mine that they're anxious to get into a play, and it's called Bootlegger Queen Nellie Green. And I'll tell you, as an author, I was blessed because in this book, I got to know one of the family members, and they gave me access to Nellie Green's actual diary that was unpublished. So a lot of it is in her words, and it's amazing how she spoke. She was from Connecticut, but she had her odd way of speaking, and you get a kick out of it. She talks about how she gets a boost from New York and from the real McCoy there on the ocean, and she's just an amazing person. She learned how to use her fists when she was 10 years old, so nobody messed with her. But the fact is that she saved 20 lives before she became a before she became a bootlegger. And because of that, when it came time to bootleg, all the relatives and all the neighborhood, and even the police and the politicians, they would all give her money. Because they knew she would use it properly. And so she was successful throughout her career, but just the interplay between her and all these big shots. And like I said, nobody must have with Nellie Green, believe me. So anyway, we have the Connecticut, it's a long title, Connecticut radio and disc jockeys. There's 174 pages in the book, 100 photos, and 130 disc jockeys are highlighted in this book. So it's pretty intense. Dick Robinson, I'm sure you might know who he is. He's a legend. He wrote the foreword for the book, a real nice foreword. And I got blurbs from people like Hall of Famer Steelers Cavalier, from Hall of Famer Dennis Dunaway, who founded his group, I forgot what it is. And he also the Brian Smith, Dennis Dunaway, Christine Ullman, and Ken Evans of the Fifth Estate. He and I also got some really great quotes from guys like Danny for the book, which I really appreciated. And I spent a little time talking about sock hops versus record hops, because that involves the disc jockeys also. And you probably know the story, but sock hops, that definition came about because the kids were required to take their shoes off in the gymnasium where they had the dances, and so they were required to dance in their socks. But afterwards, as things got going, it grew outside, and so they would have these record hops, they would call it now, and disc jockeys like Jim Gallant, who was the host of Connecticut Bandstand, and Dick Robinson would do a lot of the record house, but a lot of disc jockeys did that. But that's kind of the distance of different things. Now, are you guys familiar with music surveys? Do you remember these little sheets that you got? Okay. And these served a really useful purpose. It's kind of a win-win situation. The record company would get all this data, send it over to the record store. The record store would hand these out free. So as a kid, I could remember picking one of these up and looking for my favorite record. But then I would look at what's number one and number two. Okay? And so I buy one or two more records. So the record store, they got a bonus there because we buy those records. There are simple charts which show the current rating and then the previous ranking. For example, Reach Out, I'll Be There was the number 2 song in this particular survey. It was number 1 last week. And some of them were a little bit more complex. In this one, you have a disc jockey, you had the logo, and then you had a little contest that they would have. And they could never do this today, I don't think. The WABC had a contest called the Cutie of the Week. And Luis Galasso won a transistor, which was a big deal. And I know Louise, and she remembers that, but she can't find the radio. But I have one. And speaking of transistors, now to me, this was probably one of the greatest inventions ever, because the kids would, it gave them independence, which they always wanted. And so the kids would put in the earbuds, Plugs or whatever.
One.
Right.
Only have
That's right. It wasn't really.
Yeah.
Your phone.
Their phone.
Yeah.
Up in your sleep.
Anyway, it seems to do the deal, yeah. So they could tune out anybody, including their parents and even the teachers. And I remember there were wise guys and sitting in the back, they would pretend like they were, listening. They were louder. And this still works, believe it or not. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And also there's music concerts. And I don't want to go into all of it, but the disc jockeys would host these music concerts, these big music concerts. Some of them big, some of them small. And I think of two of them, and one of them was the Rolling Stones when they appeared in Dillon Stadium. You remember that? And it was done in 1966, I think it was. And the other one was the what was it? Hold on a second. I want to read you the list of people in this thing. It was the Gene Pitney show. And Gene Pitney would bring along all the groups at the time that were very famous, such as the Buckinghams, the Fifth Estate, Easy Beats, all those guys. And they're all at the top of their game. Okay. So I went to that concert. It was at the Bushnell. And there was about eight bands. And again, they're all number 1, number 10, whatever. So we really got our money's worth in the first half, right? And in those days, getting your money's worth meant, what are you paying, $10, $5 or whatever? So, and so the second half would be Gene Pitney coming out. I don't know if you ever heard Gene Pitney in his prime, but man, oh man, what a voice he had. And this was at the Bushnell. And I swore when he came out, I thought the windows were going to break because he hit this one song. And in fact, the guys in the back, the artists in the back, when they were taking bets on whether to hit this note. It was called I'm Gonna Be Strong. And it ends off real high. And he nailed it all the time. It's unbelievable. Felix Cavalier gave me a bunch of quotes, and he said, the radio and disc jockey perform a vital connection between the listener and the artist. Because the artist could have the greatest song in the world, but if it's not played, what good is it? And he also said that in this day, they didn't have Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or anything. But he said, when he was very serious when he told me this, he said, but we had our songs. And it was our songs that bonded us with the listener. And sure enough, it was incredible. My wife went to the 1966 performance of the Rascals at the arena, and he said they were terrific. What else did I got for you? I wanted to bring to your attention 2 people that you may or may not know that were very critical of the music business in those days. One is Charlie Parker, who was an outstanding program manager. He was very powerful, and he is very likable, and he was very influential. But the second one is a bit interesting to me because it's Bertha Porter. I don't know if you ever knew her name. Bertha, if you saw her, the picture, you would never know she was a rock and roll person. But she had this uncanny ability to predict whether your song was going to be at the top 10 #1 or top 40 song. All you have to do is ask Al Anderson of the Wild Weeds, because Al was searching back and forth all these stations. He couldn't get his song played. So he met up with Bertha Porter, and Bertha said, let me hear the record. And he played the record, and halfway through the record, she said, that's your record, that's your hit. And sure enough, Ain't No Good to Cry became a hit.
Yeah.
This also happened, believe it or not, with Frankie Valli. Frankie Valli was searching like Al, and for some reason, the radio stations didn't care too much for his first song, and he couldn't figure out why, and he went from station to station. Finally, Bertha Porter heard it, and he said, "Oh my God, Frankie, this is going to be a big hit." And sure enough, they played it on DRC, and it became the #1 song. And of course, they played it quite a bit. And it was confirmed when Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons played, I think, in Hartford, and Charlie Parker was in the audience. And at one point, Frankie Valli called him on the stage, and he shook his hand, gave him a hug, and he said, "Thank you, Charlie, for really getting me going." So that meant a lot to Frankie Valli and to Bertha.
Bertha had good ears, that's what it was, that's what they used to say, she's got good ears,
Yeah,
that's what.
yeah, she has an uncanny ability. I don't know what it was, but
Was she from the Haven?
Hartford, she was on the DRC for a long time.
Yeah.
Was she a DRC?
yeah. And her going away present, because they let her go, but her going away present was she predicted the Rolling Stones song at the time to be a top 10 record. They were #1. I don't know how this lady did it. Anyway, I wrote down a few people that you might recognize from the DRC: Dick Robinson, Joey Reynolds, Ken Griffin, Long John Wade. Long John Wade became friends with the Beatles, and he was on the set of Help. And he began broadcasting from Bermuda, which was where Help was filmed, I guess. And he would report back to DRC. There's also Sandy Beach and Ron Landry. A little bit about Joey Reynolds. Anybody hear about Joey Reynolds? Anybody familiar? Yeah. Good. Joey Reynolds. How would you describe? Joey Reynolds was probably the first shock jock in our country, a real shock jock. And he would just, it was stream of consciousness. He would just say everything he wanted to, and he didn't care who he offended. So he was known for that. He got hired in maybe over 30 radio stations. But when he was up in KBW in Buffalo, KBW in Buffalo was the number one, or one of the '1 radio stations in America, and hence Joey Reynolds became the #1 personality. But he got himself in trouble. But anyway, he eventually got fired. Okay, and as he was getting fired, as he was walking out the door, he got his shoes and he nailed them up on the program director's door, and he put a note, "Now fill these,"
Great.
because no one could fill them. And speaking of KBW in Buffalo, and my daughter lives up in Buffalo, and she sent me this article that blew me away. It was these two executives now, not then, but they say that the Beatles, after they performed at Sullivan, were looking for the first place to go. And the first place was planned to go to Buffalo because of KBW. Well, as it turned out, they didn't want it. KBW said, we can't pony up the 10,000 needed, and so they went to Washington DC. And I feel bad because it would have been really put Buffalo on the map, but it didn't really happen. Anyway, that was Joey Reynolds, but Joey Reynolds came down to Hartford and KBW. And when he was there, and you probably heard this story, I'm not sure. He was unlike anybody. I never knew anybody like him. But anyway, in those days, you used to play the records with the grooves, you know. And so he was playing, I think it was in the midnight hour. And the record stuck on one of the grooves, right? And so normally the disc jockey would pick up the needle, put another record in, not Joey. Joey let it stick. And it would stick over and over and over and over again. And it went on for over an hour. The station manager went bananas. So he called the police, and they had to knock down this door because he locked the door. Just to stop him, you know, how do you stop this guy? But he was known for a lot of crazy stuff. And he finally got fired when he made fun of, I don't know what he said, but he made fun of the Hartford mayor. That did it, you know. The kids loved him.
Yeah.
I loved him. But the parents hated him. And it was one of those deals. A few POP disc jockeys, Danny Clayton, Ken Griffin, Woody Roberts, Lee Baby Sins, and Rusty Potts. Now there was a war going on between WDRC and WPOP as to which station was #1 in Connecticut. And it was very close. But Charlie Parker, who I referred to before, he was very influential. So he conned, or I should say conned, but he got Ken Griffin, who was very, very popular in WPOP. He got him to switch stations to WDRC. And consequently, WDRC became the #1 station. So Charlie Parker was very, very influential. And I talk about Weeby mainly because of this guy, who's was a 38 years
At Weeby.
Weeby, yeah, and like 50, so
53
together.
something.
He'll talk a little bit. PLR, I'm not going to go through all these stations, but I'll just mention a few. PLR had a #1 station at one point with Smith and Barber, and they were very, very popular in the New Haven area. They were voted #1. And I don't know what happened, but it went out for a long time, but I don't know what happened where they split up. And so lo and behold, another group came by. You may have heard them because they made PLR #1 again, and their names are Chaz and AJ. If you ever get to listen to them, they're right. They're good. And besides that, they inform people about different things. I asked that in my interview, I asked Chaz what was the most significant event that, you know, I thought he was going to talk about rock and roll, but he was talking about the shooting in school shooting, wherever it was. Yeah. And so he's serious besides being funny. So that really was an opener for me. And I talk about Connecticut Bandstand versus American Bandstand versus Brad Davis show. Connecticut Bandstand mirrored what was going on with American Bandstand. American Bandstand had Dick Clark, and Connecticut Bandstand had Jim Gallant was first. And rumor has it that Jim Gallant wasn't running for American Bandstand, but I'm glad they chose Dick Clark. So they would have a Connecticut Bandstand would be just basically the same day when kids would come in. Actually, kids from Waterbury, my town, would be bussed into New Haven, and we noticed. I was young at the time, so I could see my sister dancing across the screen, glorious black and white. It was really cool when you're little. So that's about all I have, but I do want to mention,
What?
so I have 2 seconds.
Yeah, but were you gonna talk to?
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
If we can get
Am I
it.
It was this bad.
Yeah. And then we'll go to questions from the audience.
Okay, two very important because they're important to me, and I'm sorry if I talk to, that's what I was saying, talk to them.
Got a lot of good stories.
There's a good song.
Skits were very important because they helped my attention. I love music, but once the skits went on, if they were done by talented people, for example, Woody Roberts couldn't figure out, he knew he had a skit in mind, but he couldn't figure out a name of his skit. He couldn't figure out where they're going to go with it. So he asked Marcia Wynn, who was the secretary at the time, he said, Marcia, what's your last name? And she said, Fox. He said, bingo, that's the name I want. So they became Woody and not Marcia, Woody and Miss Fox. So he played the part of a bungling boss, and she played the part of a real competent secretary. So he would, there was a skit where he was a weatherman, he's trying to get the weather, and papers flying all about. And he said, Miss Fox, where's the weather? And she'd come right over and pick it out. But the point is that, and I'll conclude with this, the point is that he said, and it made sense, he said anybody could come up with a skit, but the good disc jockeys knew how to hold people's attention. He says, you have to remember, Marcia, that in the morning especially, people are getting ready for school, they're making lunch, the husband's not ready to work, the wife is ready to go out or whatever. So we have to have something to distract them. They have the radio on, but they're not listening. So what they did was they would come up with these skits and get your attention. And believe me, these skits could go on for hours, if not days. But there was a way that they got your attention. It was like Lee Baby Sims when he was bitten by a snake, supposedly, and he died for 4 hours, and then he was rescued. That sort of thing. So it was, we all caught on, but it was just the way they did it. That was great. And then there's interviews, and I interviewed this guy here. So without further ado,
Perfect segue to.
Thank you. Just real quick, thank you for having me. We gained friendship from this. While I was home recovering from triple bypass surgery in 23, I believe it was, when you started writing. I was home and he came to the house. He would take pictures and we talked, and you have great stories. So
Yeah.
Amazing radio stories.
Yeah.
Congratulations on the book. Thanks for having me here. And thanks for inviting me, you guys too. I said, while he was talking, I was thinking about, you said this is a book about disc jockeys, and I have this in because I can't hear very well. So I'm not listening to books on tape.
I see the transistor.
What's that?
I see the transistor in.
Yeah. It's wireless now. So when you said that, I used to do a lot of go to schools and talk to kids about career day. They invite disc jockeys in and do career days. And this is not too long ago. I was at a school in Norwalk. And I went in with my headphones. I brought a microphone. I had some CDs to give away. And I'm talking about what a career in radio would be like, and disc jockeys and blah, 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 blah. And at the end, they said, does anybody have any questions? And it was probably 8th grade. Little kid raised his hand and he goes, yeah, what's a disc jockey? Really? So I said, a DJ? Oh, DJ. Everybody knew what a DJ was, but that's how far radio has come and is going a little bit. But guys like Chaz and AJ managed to keep it alive very nicely because they're very local, and that's really what matters. But anyway, I'll tell you a quick story because you hear everything that goes on the radio, but you probably don't know a lot of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. It's usually pretty crazy, a lot of characters in this business. Everybody's a little bit, off center. They're nuts. Well, I was a 18-year-old child when I started in radio, literally. I started on September 23rd, 1972, which was my 18th birthday. It was like the biggest day of my life. And I was working at a little AM country station in West Palm Beach. It was owned by Sam Phillips, who owned Sun Recording Studios. So we had all the microphones from Memphis, you know, the ribbon mics from Elvis's studios, and one of our morning guys threatened to quit. He sent them a big Cadillac. And that was a big deal at the time, but I think it was Fat Elephant, right? In 1972. Vernon Love was out, I think. So I worked my way up from a little part-time guy making $26 a week on the weekends, and I got a midday show, which I've been doing pretty much my whole career, not from 9 to 2, but from 11 to 12, we would break the format from playing country music, which I knew nothing about, and I knew nothing about radio. And we would do a thing called tradio. I don't know if you guys ever remember listening to the radio back in the day, where somebody would call up and say, look, I have a washing machine I'm trying to sell. You ever hear those shows? Or they have, you know, I have a motorcycle. I'd love to trade it to somebody for a boat. So people would call in and they'd go live on the air. It was like a marketing organization. Like it was like classified ads at the time. So we had a delay. There was a 7-second delay. And the way delay runs today, it's digital. You know, we have a machine that hit the button, counts up the dead air, and it gives you 8 seconds or 7 seconds of dead air. But this was a tape, and on this tape there were 7 seconds with the tape, and there were 3 heads on that tape. One was playback, the next one was erase, and then the next one was record. So playback, erase, record, and come back around in 7 seconds. Blah, 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 blah. So if somebody were to call and say something they weren't supposed to say, you'd shut that off and then you'd go back live. Nobody would ever realize what happened. So just starting this business, and I'm on the air one day and the tape broke. So I don't have a 7 seconds left. So I'm on the air live, and people are calling in, everything's good. Guy calls in. Oh, first I gotta go back real quick for 1 second. In West Palm Beach, there was this sergeant from the Army. He was an Army recruiter, and he would come to all the radio stations, and we let him record public service announcements to get people to come and join the Army. And he also was a scuba instructor. So I'm working at this little AM radio station in West Palm Beach, and he was giving lessons at the pool of the program director of WIRK, which was the powerhouse top 40 station. So I would go to the guy's house and learn how to scuba dive, and I start hanging around with all these guys. It was kind of cool. You know, we go out on the WIRK news boat and Sunday morning, we scuba dive 40 feet, you know, whatever. So going back, so I got to know a lot of people in the market. So going back to the story, I'm on the air. Some guy calls up and says, "Hey, Danny," and I'm like, "Oh my God, he knows my name." So he knows my name. And this was like exciting. He goes, "Listen, I don't have anything to buy, sell, or trade. I just wanted to say," and he said yes, "on the radio." Wow. And I'm like, what do I do? I put a record on. I go running into my general manager's office. He's sitting at his desk and he's smoking a cigarette. I say, "Bill, did you hear that? What's going to happen? Am I going to get fired?" He said, "Did anybody call and complain?" I said, "No." He said, "Don't worry about it." You always imagine this guy in the van with a antenna spinning around FCC, waiting for us to swear or do something. And they're going to come and arrest us. Those guys that exist, now nobody cares, basically, really. So I'm going to fast forward. So that was 72, 1980. I was fortunate enough to work at WNBC when Imus and all those guys were there. And I was working the weekends. I was at KC 101 full-time. My shift was 9 to noon. That was my job every day. And then on the weekends, I worked at WNBC filling in. And one Sunday morning, I get a phone call, and it's this guy, Gene Tognazzi. He goes, "Danny Lyons, are you the same guy from West Palm way back in the day?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "It's Gene Tognazzi from WIRK. Can I come up and see you?" And I says, "Absolutely, come up." You know, we're hugging each other. "How have you been? What's going on?" Blah, 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 blah. We're talking, remembering the old days. And he says, "I got to tell you something." He says, "Remember that day you were on the air and the person called up and they said, on the radio?" I says, "Yeah." I said, "You heard that?" He goes, "It was me." "How did you know that?" "What do you mean it was you?" He goes, "We're all in the office listening to you," and said, "Hey, let's have some fun with Danny." It's not a delay. what's the worst thing? So he called in and but I never got fired. I stayed on the radio for 53 years since that time. So that's a little behind the scenes. I got a bunch of them that I can tell you, but one more quick thing, when you listen to the radio when you were kids and you would say, you hear the same song playing on the same radio station, you say, those disc jockeys actually talk to each other. They play the same song at the same time. Is a coincidence? Stormy Norman and I was working at TICFM at the time in the morning. He was at YZ, and we'd call each other while we were around here. We would put a song on. There were some people have to be driving around right now, wondering if we're talking to each other. So we all compete against each other, and we be against 99.9 was the biggest rivalry in Fairfield County. They hated us. PLR was in that building. That company, Connoisseur Media, they hated us. I used to tell my guys, we were number one, so we didn't have to worry. I said, don't worry about those guys. They'll screw themselves up on their own. They'll become number 3 by themselves. We'll be number 1 because of what we do. I'll worry about them. Don't you worry about them. So all of a sudden, that company bought us. The biggest rival, we come together. We're all in the studios. Our windows are seeing each other. We all love each other. We hug each other. We all respect each other. It's a brotherhood and sisterhood, and people are in it, and no one gets out alive. So
He's being humble because I think we mentioned that he was named the number 1 disc jockey for the year.
CBA.
2024.
Yeah.
What are your questions?
So, speaking of rivalries, who was the guy? He was a graduate of Notre Dame. I think he was a year behind me. He did the Foggeria thing.
John Camarda.
Right. Now, he would also pee off another guy down the aisle, down the dial. He would say he stole that.
Correct, he did.
Yeah.
That was Ron Romer and
Ron Romer. Yeah, that's right.
Ron had that
Used
character,
to go
Jose. It
Oh,
was like
yeah.
an old Mexican.
Why did you do? Yeah.
It would push a button and it would EQ his mic, so it sounded like he was off mic somewhere.
Yeah,
And Dr. Chris was a ventriloquist. He did both voices.
that's right.
And he would never let anybody in the studio.
Yeah.
People would always ask me everywhere I went, is Jose real? And I would say, yes, Jose is real. He does Dr. Chris's voice. Just. But
Steve,
I would go and I would come on after him and I'd walk
That's
in the
right.
studio and he goes, did you hear what Jose said this morning? He did this and he did that. And I says, Chris, it's you. It's you. So he had to live that life, right? And and Foggeria was 91 northbound. He still talk about it to this date. And when I tell him you brought it up, Bill loved it. I'm sorry?
What is?
That's not on here.
So his Dr. Chris and Jose was the mayor of Foggeria. That little Spanish voice, and he was the spoiled. So instead of paying 2 guys, we got to pay
Well,
1 guy.
Roper was.
And Ron Romer's
a hockey player.
He was a-
Blades.
He played for the Blades?
He played for the Blades.
And he
Yeah,
was-
he was a
Big
legend.
guy.
And Dr. Chris didn't care. He stole it from him. Made it more successful.
Question. Remember, so I grew up in New Haven. Remember the AM stations, ABZ and what was the other?
NHC.
NHC, right? Play pop stuff. But when did the FM sneak in? Because I remember listening to YBC.
Right.
And YBC was the Yale station.
Correct.
So like they played Zappa and all of that stuff. It was like considered underground radio. More or less.
PLR was the underground,
H-
I
progressive.
don't remember PLR as much as
HCN and Hartford was progressive.
HCN, yeah.
1968 when I was in high school.
there were only a few stations.
There were only a
FM
few stations. WDRC was big time FM. All the stations on FM were beautiful music. So when you were in your car, it was Mantovani.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
in stereo. And it
Yeah.
sounds so good. And we were on AM on this little speaker, something like that.
Yeah.
Sure, you all went to sleep with one of those under your pillow. when you were a kid, right?
But eventually it became album or
Album oriented rock, they called it, but in
Album oriented rock,
1979, 13 waves, which I was there at the time.
Oh, really?
We had the highest ratings that Waves ever had in history, and the program director that was there at the time convinced Cops Monahan, remember that Cops
Yeah,
Monahan
yeah,
station? Convinced these guys, FM is gonna be really big, let's take our signal, what we're doing, everything that we're doing on Waves in the AM, put it on KC 101. And we did that, it was July 9th, 1979, and the station became historic within like 3 months.
Yeah.
Everybody loved the station.
Big Waves is the first time I heard a Beatles song,
Oh, is that right?
probably 64.
Before? Yeah.
64, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember it to
Well,
this day.
That's funny how we remember everything from the past.
Yeah.
Which one was it?
Oh, shit. It was,
She loves me, yeah, yeah.
She loves me,
Wishing
right.
Shout or one.
I remember my mother had a Monza
Uh-huh.
and I was playing with the radio and that's when I heard it. I
Before that
never
was,
heard anything
Imagine
after
that.
that.
Their hair was so long.
I Want to Hold Your Hand was right before that,
But it must have been one of the,
but that was the big.
HCN, I think when they first fired up in 68, 69, they used to broadcast from the top of Meriden Mountain. That's where their
That's where their
studio
power
was.
is, yeah.
huh,
And I remember you could call, and I lived in Meriden, we used to call them up but they used to play stuff that they wouldn't even play today.
Correct.
Because they could get away with it, but also they were supposed to go off the air, maybe midnight, 11 o'clock. Sometimes they would get snowed in up there,
Uh-huh.
because the road up there is like this wide.
Right.
And they would just stay on the air all night long. But it was fun listening to that. You know, you talk about underground, I said
That's what it was.
they played stuff that
yeah,
they wouldn't even touch today.
oh,
They
yeah.
made a lot of
Yeah.
artist hits, so they made a lot of.
Yeah.
I'm curious of your opinion on this. Would it be fair to say that college radio stations, say in, 1968, okay, culture's changing, tastes are changing, there's more of a sort of a rebellious feel and a lot of, head bashing in the country between values of younger people, older people, middle-aged people, politics are changing. Would it be true that college radio really introduced a lot of people to what FM actually, eventually became?
I don't know.
It seems like the programming at that point
Because I never listened to college radio stations. I
Okay,
don't know, but I
right.
would think
Yeah.
that the rebellion pretty much started on the campuses, right? So.
Because when I think of FM stations and the more adventurous stations throughout the country that launched bands that were completely unknown
Sure.
here from the UK, that was primarily FM driven.
Yeah, on that.
I mean, there were a lot of English bands that got no US AM radio airplay.
WABC in New York and KBW. and
There were
DRC,
some
those stations.
disc jockeys from the radio stations that moved over.
Yeah.
Sure,
They love the music.
sure.
I was talking to Steve Parker yesterday. It's Charlie Parker's son. He
Mhm.
does a little group of guys and you're gonna come on the show Friday. And we were talking about college radio station compared to commercial radio. And people always say to me, do you get to play the songs you want to play on the radio? And I say, absolutely not. There's, finite number of songs we
Yeah.
play in the studio and we have to rotate them and play them a certain way. It's all, it's done to appeal to a specific audience.
Sure.
So we weren't allowed to do that, but trust me, we did back in the day. Now it's on a computer, so we can't touch it. But that's how songs became hits. The DJs would have to play this song and put it in the back of the pile. We would go to the back of the pile and play it later, an hour later. So that's why, because the DJs were loving these songs, so we were playing them more than they should have, probably. But people say that to me all the time, but doesn't that bum you out? You can't play your own songs. And I says, if I didn't want to make any money and I wanted to be the coolest guy because I can play
Yeah.
a song I want, I'd be on a college radio station or some internet radio
Sure.
station.
Sure.
But we're a business, so we design what we do to make money for our salespeople to go out and make money, so.
What role did payola play in
Oh,
the
big time.
rain that you were
100%.
being in it for so long? Can you talk
Correct.
a little bit about that?
Always,
Okay.
yeah, payola was always, and we know the big scandals for
Freed.
Alan Freed. Back in, I want to say 2001 or 2002, there was another big shakeup. There was a guy, so one of the guys that I know that was a record promoter died recently, but the labels, they always had local people, Tracy Garno, Bill Beamish. These were all guys that used to be on the radio in New Haven. They started working for record companies and they would come to Merv Amels. They would come to the radio station with their new songs. You'd listen to them. If you had good ears, you know what the hits were. or if you liked cocaine, or, you know, went to dinner, or if you wanted to go to a concert in a limo, and you wanted to go backstage, you might give the guy a little extra, okay, we'll play your song. So that was it shouldn't influence you, but it did. But there were guys, and I'm not a man of any means, so obviously I wasn't the guy that was taking the money or taking any of the stuff, but there were people that were really big time taking the money. And the independent record guys would get a ton of money. So if they got an ad, we called it, that we start playing their song, he'd get $400 for my station. And now you multiply that out times how many other stations he got it on. These guys were making tons of money, so they were sharing the wealth. There was a guy in Westchester, and probably 2001, 2002, I don't remember exactly. But he was sitting at a table bragging about, you know, I got all this money, and, you know, I got this stereo equipment. All I have to do is say to the guy, send it to my house, and blah, blah, blah. And the attorney general was sitting at so they opened this big investigation and found that, wow, payola's still going on. So they busted this guy. They busted everybody in the New York metro, which included us. They came and took our hard drives. They came and interviewed us. You know, they wanted to make sure we weren't doing anything we weren't supposed to do. So it definitely played a role. It swayed people.
Of course, I mean, what I think of is in particular novelty songs, you know, Tiny Tim. Hello Mother, Hello Father, what's that, Alan Sherman or somebody like that. I mean, you know,
Spiders and snakes.
yeah, we can, you know, we can think of those songs, and often I would think that doesn't fit in to the model
Somebody must have
that
paid that.
Tony was talking about with the woman with the good ears.
Right.
You know, she would have said, no, Tiny Tim, no, but money, Tiny Tim, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
One more question?
I always thought it should be legal, by the way.
Gotta be a law. Wait, we have time for one more question.
Honey, where do you want to go out to dinner?
Yeah.
Nobody?
Shay, what is it?
Boucher.
Barbouche. Is that something? We're all invited, and Tony's gonna.
So was Bean Michelle the guy who, we know his daughter,
Uh-huh.
but it just made me think that, was he the guy who said on Friday night, Andrew Fico, your boy is coming home, and then he talked to West Haven. What was the guy who said, Andrew Fico, your boy is coming home, and pour the
That was
martini?
his sign off on the radio.
It was a sign.
That was sign off?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
remember.
well,
I don't think it was Bill Beaver.
oh,
No,
no,
it wasn't Bill.
No,
but I just wanted,
Goodbye.
Oh, yeah.
if there isn't a real quick though, you know, I remember the block dances. Do you remember those that they would put on for charity? It was really a showcase for a lot of New Haven kids. My mother used to run them for the March of Dimes. She would go, Salt Park, she would close it down and then get a stage, and
Right.
there were some local talents. Like, I don't remember Ginny on L.
No,
Yeah, I mean, she was just those gals.
he's in my book.
Is she?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
And the kids went
very
wild.
delightful person.
What's that?
Oh, she was a very delightful person.
Oh, and she came out with a nice furry dress, and she
Yeah.
was, you know, normal, but she'd have this one song and she'd lip sync it to, because the record got stuck once. She just kind of, what you're saying, it poor kid.
Billy Vanilla. Yeah. I happened at Lake Compound.
Actually, Ginny was with, Team Pitney.
Was she?
Yeah.
She was bigger than we thought, because it's a local gal, and the generator was on the fire truck, and the kids all went into the.
Well, you know, the
park.
Carpenters were from East Haven.
That's right.
They're from my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Tracy Garno, who was one of the DJs, had a great story. I know that they going, but he had a great story. He hated the story because, you know, he was a record rep, worked for Arista Records after he get off the radio. And I used to say, Trace, tell me that story about Karen and Richard Carpenter. He goes, I don't want about it. I don't want to talk about it. They came to Waves with a record, and it was a Beatles song. It was a Ticket to Ride. They redid it. It was on the flip side of their first hit.
Wow.
And he listened to the song. He looked at them and he looked at all these people. They were really beautiful people at the time, right? And he looked at them and he listened to the song and goes, you know what, guys, I think you should get out of the business. You're not going to make it. Yes, you're not gonna make it in this
They
industry,
did,
and then they went on to be, and she had the most angelic voice.
Yeah.
you know, and-
They sang at St. Andrews over on the corner,
Yeah.
work for us.
Herb Alpert did.
And radio was always good, we're always able to help, and that was one of the beautiful things I
Yeah.
loved about
Yeah.
radio is all the charity things that we can do and raise, in my career, millions of dollars.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
many charities over the years. It's
I
fun.
lived next to St. Bernadette
So
School.
that's where, still in the night.
Still in the night.
Right, yeah.
It's probably still
In the-
there.
it's the-
in the-
Well, they have a plaque down there.
Yeah, sure.
It was the guy from Whaley Avenue, always thanked radio when he won a Grammy. Who's the guy from Whaley?
Well, Bill, Michael Bolton.
Michael Bolton.
Michael Bolton.
Always appreciated radio.
Yeah, I know, he used to sit in my office.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.